The Baltimore Ravens build a perfect practice squad. We talk about what they did, who they kept, the best of both worlds for the team, and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every day as well. We're free and available all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, audio form wherever you get your shows. Really appreciate both the audio and video communities. We bring you 5 days a week of that Ravens coverage. We do bonus shows, live episodes. We have everything you need here, Ravens-wise, on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. We are 1 week away. Can you believe it? We are 1 week away from the Ravens playing regular season, real-life football. Today is Thursday, August 29th. We know Thursday, just a week from now, the Ravens are going to be playing against the Chiefs on opening night. I'm not calling it a revenge game. I know some people are. I think the revenge would come in the playoffs. But, man, it feels so good to be 1 week away. And, again, the excitement is it's building and building and building. We got roster decisions yesterday on Tuesday. Well, I'm recording this on Wednesday. But we got roster decisions on Tuesday. And then we also had some practice squad. That's pretty much all developed for the Ravens. That happened on Wednesday. But we're going to be diving into the Ravens and what their practice squad looks like, because they built, in my opinion, a pretty perfect practice squad. And we're going to talk about how they got the best of both worlds as well for multiple different positions, stuff we had talked about on our show yesterday, just about everything with the roster decisions. Should they have kept certain guys? We'll dive into all of that. And Baltimore also apparently sniffing around some defensive line help. We'll talk about who and why it's a little interesting and why I don't necessarily get it all the way, but there are ways that it could help. So we'll dive into that in the final part of the show. So let's dive into it here. Starting off with the Ravens practice squad. I think, again, they did a great job. I'll just go through the names one by one. They have left one spot available. 16 players, the new expanded practice squad rules that happened a couple of years ago. So they left one spot available here. Offensive tackle Corey Bullock, running back Chris Collier, corner Bump Cooper, wide receiver Malik Cunningham, guard Darian Dalcor, outside linebacker Joe Evans, corner Kadar Holman, tight end Kadir Ismail, running back John Kelly, wide receiver Keith Kirkwood, quarterback Devin Leary, wide receiver Anthony Miller, defensive end CJ Ravenel, inside linebacker Josh Ross, and wide receiver Dayton Wade. That last name was the name everybody was waiting for, wasn't it? Dayton Wade. Dayton Wade was the guy, and we'll talk about that best of both worlds in the second part of the show again. But initially, just really glad the Ravens were able to get Dayton Wade back. I know that was a big conversation point just about were they going to be able to keep him? Was he a guy that was going to pass through waivers? We didn't really know. We didn't really know what that whole deal was going to be. But luckily for the Ravens, they had no players claimed on waivers. None. They also were not awarded anybody. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't put in any claims. At the time of this recording, I don't know if they did or not, but with them being 30th in the waiver order, it was pretty unlikely they were going to get anybody that they wanted. I'm not necessarily shocked that they didn't get anybody here, but they usually like to just build it out with their own guys and maybe one or two others. But in this case, it's just all guys from the training camp roster, from their 90-man. That's all it is. Corey Bullock had, I think, the best PFF grade out of all offensive linemen or undrafted. I can't remember the exact stat, but he was super highly graded by PFF. Really glad they got him back. But then these other guys, like I thought Bump Cooper would be claimed on waivers. I thought that obviously Dayton Wade would be. I thought that Joe Evans would be. I thought that those guys would all get claimed. Baltimore does keep 4 wide receivers. I only expected them to keep 3. Now that also, I guess, included Dayton Wade being on the roster. But even with Dayton Wade, I kind of expected, well, is Keith Kirkwood going to get pushed out, or is Malik Cunningham going to go elsewhere? But Anthony Miller obviously was a guy that I think they had to keep after his training camp preseason. I mean, he was doing it all for them, and just the perfect, I guess, Laquan Treadwell. They had Laquan as their, I guess, veteran practice squad guy last year. But Anthony Miller, super productive, and he definitely earned that practice squad spot. There was also a couple of other players that were not added back to the practice squad. That includes guys like Pepe Williams, which again, I'm not shocked by. I don't think there's any news on Pepe at the time of this recording, but that's definitely probably more of a change of scenery thing for him, where I feel like he could find either a place where he could play right away or have an easier path to the roster. So for Pepe, I think this probably spells the end for him with the Ravens. I guess there's still a small chance he could come back, but I'm not expecting that. Deshaun Manning ended up going to the Bengals in their practice squad. The big decision here, quarterback-wise, obviously, was that the Ravens did keep Devin Leary over Emory Jones. Not shocking. Again, I said that they were going to probably keep one of the two. The other one they weren't going to keep. I didn't expect them to keep two quarterbacks on their practice squad. And it makes sense considering that, they invested the draft capital in Leary. I feel like they like some of his arm talent. Again, I'll say it again. I didn't love the pick, and he didn't really show me a ton in the preseason, but they like enough of what he showed to where it's a no harm, no foul practice squad signing. And then if Lamar goes down, you can reevaluate, because you do not want Devin Leary in any way, shape, or form to be taking significant snaps for you. That is just absolutely the last thing you want to do. But, I mean, it's not shocking the Ravens decided to keep Leary over Emory Jones to me. And here it is. Yes, all right, I found the stat. Bullock was the highest graded rookie offensive lineman. So there we go. Rookie offensive lineman this preseason by PFF. So there's that. Also really glad the Ravens got Kadir Ismail back. I thought him as a fourth tight end option was pretty much a no-brainer. Obviously, the Ravens weren't going to keep more than three tight ends. I mean, with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler, and with other spots to fill, there really was not room for Kadir on the roster, but I thought he showed enough throughout training camp, we heard, and obviously in the preseason games, even though his stats weren't necessarily like 10 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, I thought he showed enough, especially moving from wide receiver to tight end, embarking on that new journey. And we know that Baltimore loves guys who can do more. And look, I mean, we saw the Ravens transition a wide receiver to they've done it multiple times, but the most successful one they have had was Darren Waller all those years ago. Now, obviously, for Darren, it just didn't work out in Baltimore. He needed a change of scenery, a fresh start. But the Ravens have a thing of identifying these late round to undrafted talents. And Kadir is a super tall guy. He's super talented. And I think with his physical frame, his profile, and his talent, he'll be able to make some level of an impact in the NFL at some point. And I think being in Baltimore, continuing to learn on the practice squad and learning behind some really talented tight ends, I think is great. But for him, obviously going from quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, he's had a heck of a journey. So really glad Kadir found his way onto the practice squad. Other than that, though, I mean, not a ton of surprises. Now, one of the things I will note here is the Ravens do not have a defensive lineman on their practice squad. They released a couple of their vets with injury settlements, and I guess CJ Reveno counts as a defensive lineman, but they have him listed as defensive end. I'm talking more like nose tackle type guys, right? I think CJ Reveno actually has a lot of potential. I know not a lot of people are talking about him, but he did flash on tape. But so I feel like, and we'll get to it in the final part of the show, the Ravens looking around some defensive line help. I don't think the Ravens just want CJ only because they're only defensive linemen. I feel like, again, CJ is an awesome project, and I think he can do really well for them, especially just in learning behind some of those guys. But I feel like they might want one of these much bigger guys. And CJ is a big guy himself. I mean, I'm not trying to say he's not, because he is certainly up there in terms of, he's a 6'5" dude. And I think that for me, with his experience, I think he could be good, but he's 292. But I think the Ravens might want more of a nose tackle type player on their roster. So we'll see. But I think CJ Reveno is one of the underrated players on this practice squad that, again, not a lot of people are talking about. But in terms of an actual defensive lineman that's not like defensive end, instead of like a defensive end, defensive line hybrid like CJ Reveno, I feel like it's more of a nose tackle that they might be looking for, and they left the spot open. We know that they're looking at some defensive line help. Maybe they go out there and try to sign a guy like that. So that's the other thing. But other than that, I mean, you do keep a couple offensive linemen. Joe Evans, I'm really glad they're able to keep him as well. I would be bummed if he was lost to waivers. Again, I mentioned the 4 wide receivers. Josh Ross also found his way on here as well. So a bunch of things for the Ravens, but guys that I didn't necessarily think were going to be I mean, I thought they were all going to get claimed. I thought Bump Cooper was gone. I thought Dayton Wade was gone. I thought Joe Evans was gone. And much like I said, we just have to sit here and hope and pray for an Ardarius Washington situation 3 or 4 times over. And the Ravens did it. I think that this was executed very well. I think the actual build of it, you keep 2 running backs, that's fine. 4 wide receivers, offensive playmakers, they certainly went heavy there. But again, I would probably assume they'd want to get maybe 1 more defensive lineman in there alongside CJ Ravenel. And then Daryl Worley also not on this practice squad. So maybe they look to him because Baltimore does not have a safety, only Kadar Holman and Bump Cooper in the secondary. So we'll see how that all plays out. I'm probably predicting a defensive lineman or a safety for that final spot. We'll see how it all turns out for him. Still a long way to go. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Baltimore getting the best of both worlds with some of their practice squad signings, including that wide receiver position. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on the show. First, this show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. And look, it's no secret that I work really late into the night. I don't have typical hours, and it can be tough to stay awake. I will not lie. It certainly is. But 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list to do for work or a list of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off of your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects. And for me, with my work, I have a ton to do. So even if you're a DIY guy, you can get your supplies for your project. That works out. If you have a bunch of stuff to do, whether you work from home, in the office, you can get that as well. And you don't have to forget the most essential supply. Do not forget it. That's a 5 Hour Energy shot with 0 sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. And there's a flavor for everyone. You can try them all on the site. You even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack, which is absolutely awesome. You choose the flavors. It's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code, that's locked on FB, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. It cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you still on this Thursday edition of the show. Again, 1 week away from Ravens football. Appreciate everybody being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen every day. Be sure to make your second listen of the day. Locked On Fantasy Football we have so many experts on this network doing so many things, and the fantasy football experts we have give you all the fantasy insight you need to win your leagues this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Plus, we're doing Locked On Ravens fantasy leagues. There are already a ton of them, but I do try to let everybody in. So if you want to do fantasy football, want to be a part of our Locked On Ravens Fantasy League, be sure to message me over on Twitter. I put out a post yesterday. You can comment on there too. It's free. It's on ESPN. It's 12-team PPR. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out. Also, be sure to check us out here over at Locked On Ravens. If you're an everydayer, really appreciate you sticking with me each and every day. If you're new to the channel, new to the show, welcome in. Hopefully you stay a while. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Follow along in audio form as well for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back into the show. Now let's talk about the best of both worlds for the Ravens, as this was pretty much the best case scenario, the perfect scenario for the Ravens with their practice squad. And part of that is because they were able to retain the young talent that everybody probably wanted to see on the roster. And we can start this conversation with Dayton Wade and Deontay Hardy. Those are the 2 guys. If you go back and listen to yesterday's episode, I talked about this then. I said, if Dayton Wade gets on the practice squad, there's no harm, no foul. There's no harm, no foul. Get the best of both worlds, Deontay Hardy. And I had said, well, it's up in the air because I think Dayton Wade showed more during the preseason, but the Ravens signed Hardy to that deal specifically, and they promised him a role. So it's tough. I would have kept Wade personally, but it's tough because Hardy's, I think, going to have an impact for them this season. But now you keep Hardy. Wade passes through, you get him on the practice squad, and you're like, okay, well, now Deontay Hardy can be your kick returner, and you can play him in that role, and that's great. And you still got Dayton Wade back on the practice squad. And even if you want to say, oh, Anthony Miller, still got Anthony Miller on the practice squad. But the conversation is Dayton Wade, right? It's not Anthony Miller. It's Dayton Wade. So to me, I thought that was awesome because there would have been this would be a different conversation if Dayton Wade did not make it back on the practice squad. And that's I guess, the risk you have to take here. And maybe, hey, did you know what? Baltimore waiting 4.5 hours to release their roster to everybody. Did that help all these guys pass through? I'm still not buying it. Apparently that's why teams do it. I'm still not buying that. But hey, you know what? If it helped them get those guys on the practice squad, okay. I still think there should be a mandatory, like you got to release it at 5 after it's put to the league office at 4. Because, man, we were waiting forever. But they got all their guys back. And so now you have Hardy as a player that can impact the game in the way that he does. But if there's a wide receiver injury, if someone goes down, it's probably going to be between Dayton Wade and Anthony Miller, who gets called up. And that's a other different conversation because I think it just depends on what they would need. But now you have really good wide receiver depth on your practice squad between the two I just mentioned, Keith Kirkwood and also Malik Cunningham. That's like a perfect practice squad of guys. I think that out of everybody, those were the guys. Obviously, Russell Gage didn't do enough. He was released pretty early in the process. There were a few others that didn't really make a name for themselves either. But the guys who were on the practice squad earned an opportunity, and I'm really happy for them here. Same thing with the outside linebacker group with Joe Evans, right? Best of both worlds for the Ravens, where they're able to keep Adisa Isaac on the active roster, where his injury apparently is nothing where it's going to hold him out for the first 4 weeks. Obviously, he injured the other side, the other leg, after dealing with some early leg issues. But my whole thing was if he's not healthy, you can put him on injured reserve designated to return. Joe Evans can make the roster, and you can do that. If Malik Cam was healthy, pretty sure that would have been his roster spot. But Evans showed enough. High motor guy, got to the quarterback, was able to get a couple of hits on him and get the quarterback down. And that to me is a really impressive thing because Joe Evans, again, he has that kind of like Patrick Ricard, the versatility and all that. Like he's a fun story, but also a really hard worker and a high motor player. And the Ravens love their high motor guys. So you're able to keep everybody you needed to on the active roster, no injured reserve, none of that, and keep Joe Evans. And then for corner, it's the same thing with Bump Cooper, where Bump Cooper had a great training camp, a great preseason, and a guy like that, secondary depth in the NFL, especially quality secondary depth, is really hard to find. It's really hard to find those guys. So if you're able to stack enough on your practice squad, again, the Ravens only have those 2 corners right now in Bump Cooper and Kadar Holman. I would expect them, as we talked about, to either add a defensive lineman, another one, or a safety. But to me, I think that keeping Bump Cooper and you're able to go and get other guys on your roster, TJ Tampa, who is probably, I don't even know if he's going to be active on game days, but you're able to keep him on the roster. There was never an opportunity, by the way, for the Ravens to release him. Or the thing with him would have been, was it injured reserve or not? But he's healthy now, and that's fine. But to me, keeping your 6 and then being able to get Bump Cooper on there as well is a win. And even with other guys too, like Josh Ross, he's someone that, showed some flashes and has that ability. The Ravens played this right. There was a lot of controversy about how they played certain decisions and should they have kept this guy and kept that guy. Well, I think we can all assume that Bo Braid was not making it through waivers, and he was obviously rewarded by making the roster. By the way, Bo Braid has switched his number. The Patrick Queen replacement number, that's done. He's done wearing 6. He went to 24. So not a lot of breathing room for Pepe Williams and his old number, gets taken off of Pepe and goes right to Bo Braid. So Bo Braid, number 24. Jadavian Clowney was that guy for the Ravens last year. And Marcus Peters obviously was a long time 24 during his time. But yeah, the Ravens did it right here. I think that there were a couple of decisions where I was like, this could play out in a different way. But they took some risks and it played out the right way. And usually, the Ravens know a lot about just, I think, market in general. Teams usually try to, again, it's teams like Carolina who had like 6 waiver claims with the number 1 priority. Like they claimed a lot of guys. But usually it's anywhere from 20 to 24 to 26, maybe 30 max guys that are claimed on waivers. And for Baltimore, I guess it was never really realistic to see them have like 3, 4, 5 guys claimed. Now, it could have happened for sure, but the Ravens took that risk and it paid off for them. And now their roster, they have who they want. And while they might not be done there, but their practice squad, being able to get 15 of 16 guys back showed you that they were happy with the guys that they had on their roster. They see a lot of potential in a lot of these guys as well. And I think they're feeling pretty happy about where they are, both with their roster and with their practice squad. But coming up with the final part of the show, the Ravens are still looking at help, still looking to upgrade their roster. There could be some defensive line help on the way for the Ravens. Stay tuned. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime, and I love going to live events no matter what kind they are, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. I love them all, and I've gone to a bunch over the course of my life, and I always try to get to a few per season. But Gametime now has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, there is a 50% off Labor Day offer from Gametime for Diamondbacks and Dodgers. And that game is a Gametime exclusive. It's limited availability and supply, and you can get your tickets while they last. But obviously, the big event, especially for Ravens fans who are looking to travel, is that Kansas City and Ravens game coming up in just a week now. And there are so many great deals on the Gametime app and the super deals, plus other tiers that Gametime has. And the app has a ton of different features, such as Gametime Picks, where you can make a ton of them. And it's easy with their curation to save money and save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all those events. Plus, the all-in pricing. Toggling the feature ends up showing you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, but you do have to turn on that feature if you're going all-in pricing. They also have seat views, lowest price guarantee, game time ticket coverage, and so much more. Plus, the app is really easy to use and navigate as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back for our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Thursday edition episode. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day, and just being here with me as we dive through Ravens content. We're Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time is our regular show, but we also have live shows after every single Ravens game, every single piece of Ravens big news. We have bonus episodes. We'll have a bonus episode on Saturday with a very special guest who just put out some quarterback rankings, some tiers. So we'll talk with him about what he thinks about Lamar Jackson. And we have a bunch of other fun stuff coming your way. So tell a friend, tell a family member. If they want Ravens coverage daily, we have them here covered 100%. This is episode 1,324 consecutively for me, going back 5 years, that 2019 season where Lamar Jackson won his first MVP. So time flies because now Lamar Jackson's entering year 7. And man, it feels like yesterday he was just getting drafted and scoring his first touchdown. But hey, it's go time. And Lamar talked about that, actually, saying that, he has a different leadership style now where, guys will tell him, hey, don't be so caught up and don't, be on the offensive line like that. This was on the lounge. He said this. And Lamar was like, they need to hear that from me, though. They need to. And it's a situation for him. And I'll actually pull up the full end of this quote because I thought this is the maturation process of young quarterbacks. And Lamar by no means is a young quarterback anymore, but he said that it's never coming from a bad place. It's always motivation to my guys. They're not used to me speaking that much on the field. They're seeing another side of me like, nah, I'm hungry. So everybody got to be hungry. Lamar wants it. Lamar wants it badly. And this just shows where, with the passion we've talked about with Lamar, where, he'll get upset and he'll be, he'll flail his arms or kick the football and stuff. It's not him trying to show up his guys or be like this, oh, I'm so much better than you. It's him being a leader, and the Ravens need him to be a leader. And he wants to win. His teammates want to win. He wants the best for his teammates, and he wants these guys to perform to their abilities, perform to their best. And so, yes, he's going to be upset when they lose. He's a competitive person. When stuff goes wrong, he's going to be upset. He's a competitive person. But he says it right here, and the stuff I've been talking about forever. This stuff is not coming from a bad place for Lamar. He wants the best for his teammates. He wants the best for his team, and that really is all there is to it there. But we'll talk about some defensive line help for the Ravens that could potentially be coming in. This news dropped pretty early in the morning yesterday from Ian Rappaport, who said that the Ravens are hosting veteran defensive lineman Lawrence Guy for a visit and a workout. So Lawrence Guy, obviously known for his Patriots days, but once upon a time, Lawrence Guy was a Ravens starter. Played for them for a couple of years. Started off as a bit of a journeyman, right? Indy and then San Diego, and then found his way to the Ravens, where he did play for the better part of 2 years, 2.5 years-ish. And established a role. Then he's been with New England ever since the 2017 season. He's won a Super Bowl championship, and he can provide some interior pass rushing presence for the team. Not a ton, not a ton. He's not like a 5-sack guy. His best season sack-wise actually came in Baltimore's first full year there in 2015, where he had 4.5 sacks. He's good for about anywhere from 1 to 3 sacks a season, but good against the run, solid run stuffer, and he is 6'4", he weighs 315 pounds. There we go. So again, a little bit bigger than CJ Ravenel, and I think, in terms of height, CJ has him a little bit. So it's just about profile, right? What do they want? Do the Ravens want a guy next to CJ on that practice squad potentially that is that? Now, if this is an active roster spot, does this mean the end for Brent Urban? That would be the trade-off. Brent played a lot over the course of the preseason for the Ravens, especially late in that final game. Do they see Lawrence Guy as an upgrade over Brent Urban? I don't know. I mean, Brent Urban picked the Ravens over a couple teams. I don't think this is a Urban or Guy thing. This might be look, if you can get Lawrence Guy as your last player on the practice squad, the perfect practice squad just became even more perfect. Because him and CJ Ravenel together on that defensive line, I'm fine with that. It's a vet and a young guy. Stuff we have talked about on this show is it makes sense for the Ravens to have a vet and a young guy on their practice squad. And I'm just now putting this together right now. The Ravens did keep 6 safeties. They did keep 6 safeties if you're putting Ardarius Washington in that conversation. And they have enough safety depth on the active roster, and maybe they don't need a safety, right? Maybe they say, you know what, we do need a couple of defensive linemen. We have one already and a young player that has potential. But getting Lawrence Guy in, if a guy goes down, Lawrence Guy coming up, that's solid. That's really solid. So I would be more than okay with this. I don't know if Lawrence Guy is a practice squad guy or not, though. I feel like he is a player that could probably find some level of a role somewhere. Last year for New England, he did play in all 17 games and didn't have a sack, but put together 38 total tackles, and I thought was decent for them. Not like he was all pro or anything, but he was decent for him. So I think that he'd be a perfect addition to the practice squad. Active roster, I don't necessarily see the fit. I don't think they should carry 6 defensive linemen, and I don't know that Brent Urban to Lawrence Guy is a big, upgrade. I know there's conversations about Project Washington, and he's certainly been disappointing, especially after signing that extension. But it's interesting to see where the pieces all could fit for the Ravens, because as we've talked about, they're certainly not done trying to explore avenues to improve their team, especially when every team deals with injuries. You have to have solid depth. We saw that last year. It's part of the reason the Ravens were so good. So they will always be looking to add, always be looking to improve. And that, to me, is a really, really big factor for this team. And we'll maybe see in the coming days if that happens. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Again, be sure to like, subscribe, follow along on the way out. Really appreciate you and everybody for supporting me throughout this. Really excited for another football season, which is coming up again in just a week now. We are almost there. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content. Stay tuned to see your epic tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.